Our series exploring the darkness and light of Wraith 20th Anniversary Edition continues.
Okay, let's continue this series and go into Chapter 4. Living here in Asia, that's kind of funny. 4 is, because of pronunciation, is connected with death. And Chapter 4 in this game is character creation. And we're playing ghosts, as the introduction told us again and again and again. So I find that kind of funny. Okay, Chapter 4. Character creation in Wraith, like this whole period, right, of White Wolf games, is point buy. Right? And for people who are used to rolling traits, or deciding if they will roll traits or choose traits or assign like a block of prearranged traits, that might seem a little strange. Just like most forms of older character creation, the inspiration for who the character is comes from initially how they are physically capable or not capable, and what they can, on a skill basis, do. That starts to present us with the idea of who these characters are. These concepts were particularly well communicated in the early World of Darkness games. Well, how does Chapter 4, character, hold up? It lets us know in its first paragraph that character creation is fundamental to the experience of role-playing. Okay. And then it connects the numbers or dots on the sheet to the concept of the character, which is good. This whole first couple of pages, is really targeting people who've never played before, which is interesting. It's an interesting decision to make for a game like this, but it gives us very specific examples, right? How can we imagine a strength of 3, for example, and a streetwise of 2? These are the examples that they give us. And then it gives us some words of caution and support. It can take a long time, it says, to figure out who a character is. That's interesting. But then it gets us into getting started. Right? It warns us that this might seem intimidating. Now, this is one of the easier ways to do point buy. So that's a little hand-holdy, but it says in Wraith you can be anybody. And character creation in Wraith means discovering the depths of who your character is, the things that they were proud of, the things that they wished that they had done better. We're searching, really, ultimately, for potential sources of regret, right? Things that are going to tie this character to the land of the living, rather than see them transcend, whatever that means, or see them pulled apart by Oblivion as soon as they die. Right? We're looking for the people who are left behind. Why? Why were they left behind? Right? Why are they stuck, unable to move on? What are their fetters? What are their passions? What is it that they're looking to do? That's what all of this is getting us into. So from getting started on 106, then we move into a section on storytellers. Now there's 2 things I want to point out here. First thing is that, a Wraith could die at any point in their life. They might die at age 99. They might die at age 9. But they're going to be built with the same number of points. Right? So this is something you're going to have to accept from the get-go, right? Or figure out how to deal with. Is that even though you might have your initial concept of someone who lived a very full life, from the point of view of points, that's not necessarily going to be represented unless your particular group chooses to do something. It doesn't ultimately really matter, and a lot of these kind of concept problems can be avoided with a very clear opening session of who we're going to play and how we're going to represent them and what the context is. Now, the game itself advises a very strong storyteller role, right? Guide character creation. Say no to concepts that don't fit. Not all people who read that are going to be very excited about the idea of it. They prefer more of a collaborative session 0. You don't need that strong storyteller authorial voice. You really don't. But if you're going to play Wraith not as an exploration of the far shores of these different lands of the dead out there. If instead you're going to be interacting with the world of the mortals and the worlds of the, strange and curious creatures that live on the other side of the shroud, and it's mystery and investigation based, you will probably want that strong storyteller authority in order to create mysteries that you can put your full attention towards solving, rather than collaborating on creating and saying, wouldn't it be cool if? Right. Wraith is a game for, in some way, getting into an exploration of who this character is and how they react and how they're going to be changed by those reactions. So this opening part sets you up for that. Then we get into the stages of creation on page 107. We get character creation. We have step 1, the concept. You might not actually end up doing it as step 1. It might come later. Right? Then they ask you a series of questions. Who were you? And they give you some suggestions. They talk about limits, right? Death can be cruel and abrupt. Life isn't a picnic for every human being. It can take someone down twisted avenues, right? This is the warning. This is kind of hinting at there are some topics that people in your group might have actually experienced in real life and maybe don't want to talk about for their entertainment. Be sensitive. Not all people are. We get into not who were you. We move into how did you die? Then why are you still here? These are just prompts to get you thinking in the right direction, get you understanding what kind of character you're making. And in concert, if you do have that strong storyteller position who's supposed to be like taking an overhead perspective on character creation so that there's lots of links and hooks between the characters and links and hooks to the type of mystery or investigation or revelation about life after death that the storyteller is going to be enjoying as their part of the fun of this collaborative project, right? If you don't have that, then you will need to have a strong session 0, which again, likewise, puts those boundaries on what types of characters to create, right? And these questions will be answered through those filters. We get into nature and demeanor. What kind of character do you want to be and what do you want to show? I've loved that about White Wolf games from the beginning. They give us personality archetypes, right? And these aren't just role-playing. These are also tying you to a mechanical benefit, right? By fulfilling these, it will tie into your self-worth, and that ties into your willpower. All right. Then there's a chart for character creation, right, reminding you of what points you have to spend, and you're just filling in dots on the character sheet. It's not so bad. There's advice about choosing attributes, what the physical and social and mental attributes actually mean, and then there's advice about choosing your skills, things that you're talented in, things that you actually have to, study and become good at, skills, and then knowledges, things that require very specific education for. Then we get into the advantages section, the supernatural powers of wraiths and things, their backgrounds, their passions, their fetters, and then there's the finishing touches, right? And here we get into what we call the free points, or freebie points is what they're called, and you're going to get a certain amount of them, and that may change based on how experienced the group wants the characters to be, right? This is where you get to tweak the idea of the characters died young, or the characters died really old and really experienced, or just leave them in a vanilla state. And then we end up with the spark of life, right? What do they look like? What do they sound like? Do they have any quirks? They follow up with an example of character creation, right, which goes all the way through in exhaustive detail. And then it takes us to what now? What now talks about playing a prelude, like maybe playing the character alive a little bit, maybe playing them recently deceased, and then advancing us to now. And the only purpose this has is to help you get a grip on your beginning character concept, the distribution of points, and the setting that you're going to be playing in, and really kind of finding your initial footing in the character, trying to find their voice, in other words. Then they give us another set of questions and answers, right? Again, to kind of finalize that concept of who you are. After you play through the prelude, you might want to be adjusting some things because it didn't work like you thought it would, or it was too much, or you suddenly realized that that person wouldn't be interested in that thing, they'd be interested in this other thing, that kind of stuff. And that ends chapter 4. It's really quite interesting. Chapter 4 is the beginning of everybody working in the Chronicle, or the campaign, if you prefer. The characters are being created. The characters are being connected to each other, so there's some relevance to have a play group that's going to be using those characters. The characters are going to be tied to the world that they occupy and given some motive force in terms of what they care about, what they're tied to, what they regret, what they wish they hadn't left behind, or what they wish they had not done, right? These things then are made obvious to the group because they're written on the very corpus of the Wraith, unless they choose to hide it with a mask. And where do they get the mask? Right? Where do they get these resources, these physical things of the underworld, and so on and so forth? So there's a lot of meat here for really getting your fingers dug into the very stuff of Wraith. Character creation in Wraith is incredibly satisfying, and it's not over yet because we still have the shadow to deal with and all these different abilities. So until next time in chapter 5, traits.